Have you ever wondered why some people can get others to do exactly what they want without giving orders, without using force, and without even arguing? They do not pressure people. Instead, people begin making the very decision that benefits that person. This is not magic. This is reverse psychology. It is an art of the human mind, understood and used by many of history's great strategists in politics, in business, in relationships, and in the games of power. Some people call it manipulation. Others call it psychological strategy. But the truth is simple. Unless you understand the human mind, you can never understand the real power of influence. Here, you will discover 13 Machiavellian laws of reverse psychology, principles that reveal how people think and how they can sometimes be influenced without even realizing it. Deeper cautionary tone. But remember, this knowledge is as dangerous as it is powerful. Chapter Reset. Deliberate. Law 1. The illusion of choice. Simple, direct. The human mind does not like commands. Reflective. The moment someone tells us directly to do something right now, a small voice rises inside us, a quiet protest, a slight resistance. Measured. That resistance is not always visible, but in the mind it creates an immediate reaction. Slight rise on the question, why am I being told what to do? Clear explanatory flow. Human beings naturally want to feel free. Every person wants to believe that their decisions belong to them. This is why direct orders often fail. Subtle lift. And this is where the first and most fascinating strategy of reverse psychology begins. Emphasize the concept, the illusion of choice. Slow slightly. It means making people feel that the decision is theirs, even when you have already decided the direction. Conversational example tone. Imagine telling someone, do this right now. There is a good chance they will delay, make excuses, or try to do it later. Contrast gently. But if you say the same thing differently, would you rather do this now or in an hour? The situation changes. Measured clarity. The other person feels as if they have been given a choice. They think the decision is in their hands, but in reality, both options lead in the direction you wanted. Insight lands. That is the illusion of choice. Warmer, explanatory. Take a simple example. A parent tells a child, go study. The child may refuse immediately or say they will do it later. Lightly quicker through example. But if the parent says, would you like to study math first or science, the child can no longer escape studying. The choice exists only within the activity itself. The child's mind is no longer focused on avoiding study. It is now busy deciding which subject to begin with. Gentle emphasis. That is the real power of this strategy. Calm nonfiction authority. According to psychology, the human mind needs autonomy. We all want to feel a sense of control. When we are given options, the mind becomes calmer. We feel that we made the decision ourselves. And that small illusion can change behavior. Lower pitch, key takeaway. Because sometimes the easiest way to guide people is to make them feel that they are the ones in control. Chapter Reset. Controlled. Law 2. The forbidden fruit effect. Reflective curiosity. The human mind has a fascinating habit. Controlled contrast. When something is easily available, we often value it less. But the moment something is forbidden, it suddenly becomes far more attractive. Storytelling tone, restrained. A famous story from history explains this psychology deeply, the story of Adam and Eve. It is said that they were allowed to enjoy everything in paradise, the fruits, the trees, nature itself, everything. Brief silence. But there was one tree whose fruit they were forbidden to eat. Deeper emphasis. Just one restriction, and that fruit became the most tempting of all. Calm explanation. This is the nature of the human mind. In psychology, it is called the forbidden fruit effect. When something is restricted, its appeal multiplies. because a restriction does not only create a rule, it also creates curiosity. Transition with slight lift. Look at real life. Clear commercial example tone. The world of marketing understands this principle very well. Many brands use words like limited edition, members only, exclusive access, or only 100 pieces available. Emphasize signal lightly. These words do not merely give information, they send a signal to the mind that this thing is not available to everyone. Slow slightly, and suddenly even an ordinary object begins to feel special. Short, firm. Scarcity increases desire. Slight rise. But why does this happen? Deeper, explanatory. The reason lies in a deep psychological reaction inside the mind. When we feel that something is being restricted or taken away from us, the mind begins to see it as a challenge. Clear technical term. In psychology, this is called psychological reactance. It is a mental response that arises when we feel our freedom is being limited. Leaner, closer. The mind says, if I am not being allowed to have this, then perhaps there is something special about it. Gentle emphasis, and that thought makes the desire even stronger. Reflective landing. That is why sometimes the most powerful attraction does not come from availability, it comes from prohibition. Lower pitch, key takeaway. Because the human mind is most strongly pulled toward the very thing it has been told it cannot have. Chapter reset, controlled. Law 3, strategic surrender. Confident, steady. Victory does not always come from displaying strength. Thoughtful. Sometimes the most powerful strategy is to take one step back. At first glance, it may look like defeat, but many times that very step becomes the beginning of real victory. Define clearly. This is called strategic surrender. Measured. It means deliberately accepting defeat for a moment. This is not weakness. It is a psychological strategy used by many experienced negotiators and leaders. Calm authority. Because there is an interesting rule in human behavior. Slow slightly. The more opposition there is, the more resistance grows. But as soon as opposition decreases, people begin to think differently. Transition. Consider a simple example. Two people are arguing about an issue. If you immediately begin proving the other person wrong, the argument intensifies, voices rise, emotions enter the room. Slowly, the discussion moves away from logic and turns into a battle of ego. Lower pitch. Now, the goal is no longer to find the truth. The goal is to win. Brief silence. But imagine that in the same argument, you suddenly say, maybe you're right. Insight emphasis. That one sentence changes the direction of the conversation. Measured, calm. The other person, who had built a mental wall to defend themselves, suddenly becomes calmer. They no longer feel the need to fight, and often they begin to rethink their own position. Sometimes they may even say, no, that is not exactly what I meant. The same person who was firmly defending their point just a few seconds earlier now begins to adjust it on their own. That is the power of strategic surrender. This strategy teaches us that it is not necessary to win every argument. Sometimes stepping out of the argument is the wisest move. According to psychology, when a person faces direct opposition, their mind immediately enters defensive mode. They stop listening. They only try to protect their own position. But when opposition drops, the mind becomes calmer, and in that moment, it may become open to new ideas. That is why sometimes the strongest influence does not come from speaking louder. It comes from quietly stepping back at the right time. Chapter 4. The Power of Silence. People often believe that being influential means speaking more, speaking louder, answering quickly, and always having something to say in every situation. But the truth is completely different. Many times, the most powerful words are the ones never spoken. This is the power of silence. Silence is a strategy used with great intelligence by many skilled negotiators, leaders, and investigators, because silence is not merely the absence of sound. Silence creates psychological pressure. Imagine you are sitting in an interview. You are asked a question. You answer, and after that, the interviewer says nothing. They simply keep looking at you. A few seconds pass, and suddenly you begin to feel uncomfortable. Was my answer incomplete? Should I say something more? And then you start speaking again on your own. Many times you may even give more information than necessary. That is the power of silence. The same thing happens in negotiation. Imagine you state a price and then say nothing. If the other person cannot tolerate the silence, they may start talking. Sometimes they may even improve the offer themselves. According to psychology, the human mind does not like empty space. When silence suddenly enters a conversation, the mind sees it as an unfinished situation. It tries to fill the gap. That is why many people begin speaking simply to end the silence. But those who understand silence know that it is not necessary to answer every question immediately in every conversation. Sometimes, a few seconds of silence can be more powerful than a long speech. Because silence at the right time does not only draw out words, it draws out the other person's true reaction. And that is why, in the world of influence, the most powerful voice is sometimes the one that cannot be heard. Chapter 5. The Mirror of Narcissism. Inside every human being is a hidden desire. The desire to feel good about oneself. Every person wants to be understood, appreciated, and made to feel important. This desire of the human mind gives birth to a very powerful psychological principle. It is called the mirror of narcissism. It means showing a person their best possible image. When you show someone their ideal self, they often begin to behave according to that image. Because every human being lives with a story about who they are. Someone sees themselves as hardworking. Someone sees themselves as honest. Someone sees themselves as responsible. And when another person accepts that story, they try to preserve that identity. Imagine telling someone, "You are a very responsible person." It may sound like a simple compliment, but behind it is a deep psychological effect. As soon as the person hears it, an image forms in their mind, the image of a responsible person. Now, subconsciously, they begin trying to behave according to that image. They may start working on time, taking responsibility, and shaping their behavior around that identity. We know that no one wants to see the image they believe about themselves collapse. In psychology, this can be understood through self-image theory. Our behavior is influenced by our identity. We try to become what we believe we are. That is why when someone is shown their best identity, they often work to preserve it. But there is one important thing to understand. This strategy works only when the words feel sincere and natural. False praise is often recognized quickly. But when a person is shown their best version of themselves, they may begin to grow into that version. And that is the real power of the mirror of narcissism. Because sometimes the easiest way to change people is to show them that they are already better than they think. Chapter 6. The Ego Challenge Technique. There is a force hidden inside the human mind that can sometimes be more powerful than logic. That force is the ego. The ego is the desire to prove oneself. Every person carries an identity within. They see themselves as capable, strong, and sometimes even better than others. That is why when someone's ego is challenged, it suddenly becomes active. This principle is known as the ego challenge technique.
The foundation of this strategy is simple. Imagine you say to someone, "Maybe this is beyond you." There can be two reactions. Some people may step back, but many people take it as a challenge. A voice rises inside them. Why can't I do it? And in that moment, their ego awakens. Now their goal is not just to do the task, their goal is to prove themselves. That is why sometimes a small doubt can create powerful motivation inside a person. Look at the world of sports. Many coaches use this technique. Imagine an athlete who is exhausted by difficult training. They are beginning to feel like giving up. Then the coach says, "Maybe you are not ready for this level." The moment the athlete hears those words, something changes inside them. Despite the fatigue, they try to prove themselves. They work harder. Because now it is no longer just practice. It has become a matter of ego. According to psychology, the human ego wants to protect its identity. When someone questions our ability, the mind sees it as a threat, and in response to that threat, we try to prove ourselves. But this technique must be used carefully, because every person reacts differently. Some people are motivated by a challenge, others may feel discouraged by it. But in the right situation, given in the right way, a challenge can awaken a hidden strength inside someone.
Because sometimes the strongest motivation does not come from praise, it comes from the desire to prove someone wrong. Chapter 7. The Anxiety of Freedom. We often believe that the more freedom we have, the happier we will be. The more choices we have, the easier decision-making will become. But the truth of the human mind is often the opposite. Interestingly, too much freedom can also create fear. This is called the anxiety of freedom. When too many options stand in front of us, the mind suddenly becomes confused. Which option is right? What if I choose the wrong one? What if I miss something better? Because of this thinking, making a decision becomes difficult. Choices increase, but clarity decreases. Imagine you are sitting in a restaurant. If the menu has only 5 or 6 dishes, the decision is easy. You choose quickly. But if the menu has 50 or 60 items, you suddenly pause. You read every option, you compare, you wonder what might be best. And often it takes a long time to decide. Sometimes, even after making a decision, the mind is not fully satisfied. It keeps thinking that perhaps another option would have been better. This is why many modern restaurants intentionally keep limited menus. Fewer choices make decisions easier. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as choice overload. When too many options are placed in front of us, the mind becomes tired trying to process them. This mental fatigue creates decision anxiety. In other words, as options increase, confusion can increase as well. That is why sometimes the most effective strategy is not to show every option, it is to limit the options. Because the human mind feels more comfortable not among endless possibilities, but with a clear direction. And that is why sometimes the greatest freedom is found within fewer choices. When there are fewer paths, the mind can move forward with greater clarity. Chapter 8. The False Weakness Strategy. Power does not always come from displaying strength. Sometimes the greatest strategy is to appear weak. This may sound strange. The world teaches us that we should always appear strong, confident, fearless, and in control. But history and psychology tell a different story. Many times, a person who appears too powerful makes others cautious. People become alert around them. They begin hiding their true thoughts. But when someone appears weak or ordinary, people's caution begins to drop. And that is where the false weakness strategy begins. This strategy means deliberately presenting yourself as less threatening so that the other person behaves more openly. Imagine two people sitting in a negotiation. If one person speaks with great confidence and aggression, the other person immediately becomes cautious. They begin hiding information. They choose their words carefully. But if that same person appears calm, ordinary, and slightly unsure, the other person may open up more. They may think this person is not such a strong negotiator. And because of that thought, they may share more information. That is the moment when real insight appears. Throughout history, many great strategists have used this principle. Armies sometimes have deliberately appeared weak so the enemy would become overconfident and make a mistake. According to psychology, the human mind is highly sensitive to threat. When someone appears powerful or highly influential, the mind immediately enters defensive mode. We become alert. But when the threat feels low, our protective walls begin to come down, and that's when people reveal their real thoughts and emotions. But one important point must be understood. False weakness does not mean actually being weak. It is only a strategy of perception. Because sometimes the wisest person is not the one who displays strength all the time. It is the one who knows when to hide it. Chapter 9. Constructive Pessimism. We often think the best way to motivate people is to encourage them constantly. To tell them, you can do this, you're very capable. And often this is true. But motivation in the human mind does not always come from praise. Sometimes a little doubt can become a powerful source of motivation. This principle is called constructive pessimism. Constructive pessimism means expressing doubt in a way that does not break a person, but pushes them to prove themselves. Imagine saying to someone, "I don't think this is possible." Some people may step back after hearing that, but many people take it as a challenge. A feeling rises inside them. I will prove you wrong. And in that moment, a new energy may emerge. Now, the task is no longer just a task. It becomes a matter of self-respect. To motivate students, many teachers sometimes use this technique. Imagine a student looking at a difficult problem and saying, "I can't do this." Then the teacher says, "Maybe this problem is a little above your level." Hearing this, two reactions may arise in the student. The first is surrender. The second is the desire to prove themselves. And many times, that second reaction brings out a hidden ability. According to psychology, the human mind wants recognition. We want people to see and accept our capability. But when someone doubts our ability, the mind may see it as a challenge, and to overcome that challenge, we begin working harder. But balance is very important here. Constructive pessimism works only when the doubt contains a challenge, not an insult. Because doubt, when given in the right way, can awaken incredible motivation inside a person. And sometimes, people achieve their greatest accomplishments not because of praise, but because they wanted to prove someone's doubt wrong. Chapter 10. The Implanted Idea. The human mind holds an interesting secret. People often don't easily accept ideas when they're told directly, but they believe those same ideas very strongly when they feel they thought of them on their own. This principle is called the implanted idea. It means placing an idea in someone's mind in such a way that they feel the idea is their own. Because the human mind values freedom deeply, we want to feel control over our decisions. When someone directly tells us what we should do, the mind often resists. But if the same idea feels as though it came from our own thinking, we accept it more naturally. Imagine giving advice to a friend. You say, "You should do this." There is a chance they immediately respond, "No, I do not think so." But if you ask, "Don't you think this approach might work better?" the situation changes. Now it is not an order, it is a question. And questions force the mind to think. As soon as the person reflects on the question, an idea begins forming in their own mind. And if they arrive at that conclusion themselves, they feel the decision belongs to them. That is the real power of the implanted idea. You gave the thought, but they felt it came from their own mind. In psychology, this can be understood through self-generated persuasion. When a person creates an idea themselves, they connect with it more deeply. It is not merely information, it is the result of their own thinking process. For that reason, they believe it more strongly. This is why many great leaders and communicators ask questions instead of giving direct answers. Because sometimes the most effective way to change people is not to tell them what to think, it is to give them the right question to think about. And when an idea is born inside a person's own mind, it becomes the strongest kind of idea. Chapter 11. The Contrast Principle. The human mind does not understand things in isolation. We often understand the true value of something only when we get the chance to compare it with something else. In other words, the mind often makes decisions through comparison. This psychological principle is called the contrast principle. The contrast principle means presenting something in such a way that what comes before it or after it changes how it feels. Perception changes. Imagine you walk into a store. First, you are shown a very expensive product. You look at it and immediately think, "This is too expensive." Then, the shopkeeper shows you another product that costs much less. Suddenly, the second product seems far more reasonable. If you had seen that same product first, perhaps it would also have seemed expensive. But because you first saw something much more costly, your perception changed. That is the power of the contrast principle. Now look at negotiation. Many experienced negotiators deliberately begin with a very large proposal. If someone ultimately wants a particular deal, they may begin much higher. Calmly, when the other person hears the large proposal, it feels excessive. But later, when the price comes down to the real target, it suddenly seems reasonable, even though that was the goal from the beginning. According to psychology, the mind is influenced less by absolute numbers and more by relative differences. We do not see things separately, we see them within context. What we see first can change how we perceive what comes next. That is why many businesses use the contrast principle in pricing, marketing, and negotiation, because the right comparison can completely change a decision. And that is why in the human mind, the true value of something is often not decided by its actual price, but by what was seen before it. Chapter 12. Controlled Incompetence. The world places great value on skill and competence. We are taught to become better at everything, to handle every responsibility, and to prove our ability. But in the real world of behavior, an interesting psychological strategy sometimes works. It is called controlled incompetence. It means deliberately not appearing to be an expert at everything. In certain situations, it means allowing yourself to seem slightly less capable. This may sound strange, but often the person who appears highly capable at everything is the one who gets every responsibility placed on them. People think this person can handle anything, and slowly that person becomes the one chosen for every small and large task. The result is excessive pressure and exhaustion. Consider a workplace example. There are two employees in an office. The first employee appears to be an expert at everything. They complete every task quickly. They find a solution to every problem. Within short time, the manager begins to see them as the most reliable person, and then every new responsibility starts coming to them. On the other side, the second employee is good at certain tasks but does not appear to be an expert at everything. Sometimes they say, "I do not know this very well,"
or someone else may be better suited for this. Gradually, people send them only the work they are actually good at. According to psychology, people distribute responsibilities based on perceived ability. We give others the tasks we believe they are most capable of handling. So if someone appears to be an expert at everything, people assume they can handle everything. Controlled incompetence does not mean actually being incapable. It can be a strategy for balancing energy and responsibility. Because intelligence is not only in doing everything. Sometimes intelligence lies in knowing which work is truly worth doing yourself and which work is better left for others. Chapter 13. Strategic Withdrawal. A deep rule operates inside the human mind. Anything that is always available gradually loses value. But something rare, something not present all the time, suddenly becomes more important. This principle is called strategic withdrawal. It means stepping back at the right time. This is not simply creating distance, it is a psychological strategy.
Because when you are available all the time, people begin to take your presence as normal. Your availability becomes a habit, and people often begin to value less what is always within reach. But as soon as you step back a little, as soon as your availability decreases, people begin to notice your absence, and the value of your presence rises. The business and marketing world understands this principle very well. Many famous brands do not keep their products available in the market all the time. They use a limited release strategy. The product is available only for a limited time or launched in very small quantities. As soon as people hear only limited pieces available or available for a short time only, demand for the product suddenly increases. People try to buy quickly because they fear the opportunity may slip away. That is the power of scarcity. According to psychology, the human mind connects scarcity with value. When something is rare, the mind assumes it is more valuable. This is also called the scarcity principle. And the same rule works in relationships, business, and the world of influence. If you are always available, people assume you will always be there. But when you step back at the right time, your presence becomes valuable again. Because sometimes the most effective way to increase your value is not to remain in front of people all the time. It is to take one step back at the right moment. And that distance makes people realize how important your presence truly is. All of these principles help us understand the depth of the human mind. But it is important to remember that influence and manipulation are two different things. Knowledge should not be used to harm people, but to understand them. Because in the long run, trust is the greatest power. Human behavior is never completely rational. Our decisions are shaped by emotions, ego, and perception. When you understand these psychological patterns, you do not only understand others more deeply, you begin to understand yourself better as well. And that is where true wisdom begins. Remember, the greatest power does not lie in controlling others. It lies in understanding human nature.